Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I'm so glad you're here today because we are going to dive into something that literally affects every single one of us every single day. We're peeling back the layers of human identity itself. It's kind of like a giant puzzle. We're going to take a journey through sociology, psychology, and even the digital spaces we hang out in to figure out if the person you think you are is actually you, or is it all just an incredibly well-rehearsed act?
So, right off the bat, I want you to ask yourself a seemingly simple question. Who are you when no one is watching? Seriously, think about it. Does that completely unobserved person even exist? From the second you wake up, pick out your clothes for the day, and start scrolling on your phone, you're already engaging in these tiny rituals of identity. Today, we're exploring the fascinating and honestly sometimes a little unsettling idea that your identity might just be a carefully curated performance, one that's totally shaped by the audience you're expecting to see it.
All right, let's jump into part one, the theater of everyday life.
To really wrap our heads around this, we got to step back to the 1950s for a quick sociology lesson. We're looking at a brilliant sociologist named Erving Goffman. He basically revolutionized how we look at human interaction by comparing it to a literal theatrical play. He called it the dramaturgical approach. Basically, Goffman argued that in everyday life, we are all actors. We're constantly doing what he called impression management. We build this idealized front to convince our audience, your boss, your partner, even the barista at the coffee shop, that we perfectly fit the role we're playing. We use the room we're in, the clothes we wear, our tone of voice, all of it acts as props and costumes to make our performance totally believable.
Now, Goffman makes a really clear split between two zones in our lives. First, you've got the front stage. This is your official stance. It's polished, idealized, and it plays right by society's rules. But then you have the backstage. This is where the mask finally comes off. It's the sweatpants on the couch version of you where that polished impression you had out front is knowingly dropped. Backstage is your safe zone. It's where you can complain, be messy, and just breathe, totally away from the exhausting demands of your audience.
Which brings us to section 2, true versus false self.
As you can probably guess, constantly managing these front stage performances, it creates a ton of friction inside us. Shifting over to psychology for a second, psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott noticed this profound split inside people. On one hand, you have your true self. That's when you're spontaneous, authentic, and you actually feel alive. But on the other hand, you've got the false self, which is basically a defensive facade. You can really compare Goffman's whole theater idea to the concept of a Jungian persona, that social face we put on for the world. Now, having a flexible persona is totally normal. But if you cling too hard to a rigid defensive mask, it can turn into a pathological false self. You end up looking super competent on the outside, but feeling completely empty and disconnected on the inside.
And the existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre? He captured this tension perfectly with his concept of bad faith, or mauvaise foi. Sartre argued that when we reduce ourselves to just these fixed roles, like saying, well, I'm just a teacher, or I'm just a manager, we're actually lying to ourselves. We use these labels as a shield to hide from the massive, radical freedom of choice we actually have. We get so lost in playing the character, we completely forget we're the ones who chose the script in the first place.
Let's look at section 3, the authenticity paradox.
So what does this 1950s theory actually look like in our modern lives? Well, in the professional world, Harvard Business Review highlighted this wild concept called the authenticity paradox. They found that when leaders step into a big new role, they almost always feel like imposters. Because the job pushes them way out of their comfort zone, their gut reaction is to fall back on what feels natural or authentic. But here's the catch. Research shows that stubbornly sticking to your authentic self can actually hold you back. Sometimes you literally have to act out of character to grow into a new one.
Psychologist Mark Snyder found that people generally fall into two buckets when dealing with this. You've got chameleons, who are super high self-monitors. They can just naturally adapt to whatever a situation needs without feeling fake at all. But then you have true-to-selfers, and they struggle hard with this. When they try to balance, say, being the boss but also being approachable, they feel like total frauds if it doesn't instantly match how they feel inside. They feel forced to choose between being a failure or being a fake, and honestly, that's a pretty miserable spot to be in.
Moving to section 4, digital stages and curated personas.
Okay, if you think balancing all these roles in the real world is tough, wait until we see what happens when Goffman's theories crash into the digital age. Recent research looking at Generation Z shows exactly how digital exhibitionism is rewiring us. Goffman's physical front stage has completely morphed into apps like Instagram and TikTok. But these aren't really spaces for authentic expression, are they? They're highly curated stages.
Users are pressured by algorithms and aesthetics to build a constant highlight reel, which creates this massive, exhausting gap between who they are offline and the digital persona they're playing online. And this is the real game changer. Goffman's actors were putting on a temporary show for a few people in a room. Today, under what Shoshana Zuboff calls surveillance capitalism, we are performing for a global audience, 24/7, and our identity is literally being monetized. Even our deepest insecurities and vulnerabilities get styled and soft-filtered so they perform well in the algorithm. It completely nukes the boundary between what's supposed to be private and what is performative.
This whole digital curation thing perfectly echoes post-structuralist thinkers like Michel Foucault and Judith Butler. Butler famously said that identity, and she focused a lot on gender, isn't a noun, it's a verb. It's something you do. It's built through repetition, style, the way you speak. So if identity is something we constantly perform into existence, then out there on the internet, we are quite literally manufacturing ourselves with every single post, like, and share.
All right, Section 5, when the mask collapses.
So, what happens when the weight of all these performances just becomes too heavy? We hit the absolute core of this whole existential onion. The mask collapses. Whether it's from a major life crisis, severe trauma, or just pure burnout, the performance shatters. Clinically, you might experience something called depersonalization. It's this terrifying void where you feel totally detached from the you that you've always known. Think about it. If you've strapped a mask to your face your entire life just to feel safe or successful, and suddenly it's gone, you're left staring into the abyss asking, wait, if I'm not this role, who am I?
But honestly, here is the beautiful plot twist. A lot of spiritual traditions look at this collapse not as a tragedy, but as liberation. Take the Buddhist concept of anatta, or not-self. It teaches that dissolving the illusion of this solid, fixed ego is actually the whole point. This ego death, this total loss of the script, is a gateway. When the walls of your performed self finally fall down, it makes room for genuine expansion, deep connection with others, and a profound, real freedom.
Finally, Section 6, reclaiming the authentic self. So how do we actually pull this off? How do we live in a world that demands a performance without getting trapped in it? Well, here's a quick roadmap for what we can call conscious authenticity. Step 1, pick deep self-inquiry over superficial self-branding. Step 2, you've got to learn to tolerate disapproval. Risking being disliked is just the entry fee for maintaining your true integrity. Step 3, embrace fluidity. Let yourself evolve and change instead of staying stuck as a static character playing one rigid part. And Step 4, practice genuine presence. Just try to drop the urge to constantly manage what people think of you and just be.
I want to leave you with this one final provocative question to chew on, because it really summarizes the huge risk of being real. Ask yourself, would you rather be unknown and whole, or praised and imprisoned? Sure, the costumes we wear every single day buy us safety and applause, but true freedom is having the quiet courage to exist without the mask. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope it leaves you looking at your everyday interactions just a little bit differently. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you next time.